The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change recently concluded that human-induced climate change is already affecting many weather and climate extremes in every region across the globe. Evidence of observed changes in extremes such as heat waves, heavy precipitation, droughts, and tropical cyclones, and in particular their attribution to human influence, have strengthened significantly since their last report in 2014. These historical issues talk about the overlap of natural and human histories and the failure of systematically seeing them as separate. Today, as we move beyond that idea, we recognize the ways in which our energy-dependent societies, governments, and institutions are interlinked with the well-being of ecosystems and human communities.
As students, we think of paths forward and turn to the institutions that we are a part of, to the institutions that educate us, and build the future through new thinking and a new workforce. How is the UC system facing one of the most important issues of our time?
So for the McNair Scholars Program, I am interviewing UC administrators from across the entire system to really learn administrators' thoughts on the climate change, on UC emission policies, are we doing enough, are we moving fast enough? And the good news is administrators all believe climate change is real. The bad news is the pace at that they're moving, or that they think that they're moving, that they think they're doing a good job, that they think they're doing enough. One administrator actually told me, they're like, we don't know what's going to happen in 1,000 years in regards to climate change. And I was just like, yeah, we don't know what's going to happen in 1,000 years, but we already see what's happening now. And so it's really, I'm hearing there's a lack of urgency from UC administrators. That was just one thing I've heard. And they're really hesitant to condemn themselves. It's just so ridiculous that Scripps is the one that's doing the research on climate change, and that's the one that's ringing the bell, oh, y'all, we need to be worried about this. And yet UC San Diego is decarbonization, what's that? Y'all own scientists are ringing the alarm and things, and y'all aren't doing nothing. And so it's just you, not only would it set the standard, but it's you have to. If the ones doing the research aren't alarmed appropriately, then what's the point of doing the research?
So in 2013, UC announced the Carbon Neutrality Initiative, where it would commit the university to carbon neutrality in 2025. And the language here is super important. They commit to carbon neutrality, not to being carbon free. Carbon free would mean that the university stops burning fossil fuels. It means you stop importing methane to burn to make electricity and for heating and cooling. And that's really the dominant thing that contributes to the university's carbon emissions. But that's what carbon free would mean. You just stop burning carbon. Carbon neutral means that we mainly continue, as usual, burning methane gas, but we buy these carbon offsets to atone for it. And so this has actually already begun on at least 2 campuses. They started buying carbon offsets. One of them is UC Merced, which recently announced that they had gone carbon neutral by having purchased these offsets. And so we inquired, we asked them, what carbon offsets did you buy? And they refused to tell us. And to me, that's just stunning that a UC campus would declare carbon neutrality, but then not actually show us any of the accounting, not actually tell us how they reached that, but telling us basically just trust us. I just think that's stunning.
It's honestly a scam, because when you go on the UCOP website and you read it, you see that it says reduce emissions. If you look at the campus carbon emission numbers from UC San Diego, UC Santa Barbara, UC Berkeley, emissions have barely gone down. And so the benefit of the doubt has no longer been earned. It's not warranted.
The challenge is that there's a practical side of the story, and that is many institutions, not just the University of California, see carbon offsets as part of their solution set. Offsets are effectively a way to offload responsibility to others.
It works like this. You emit some carbon dioxide by burning some fossil fuels, and then to atone for that, you buy a piece of paper, and on that piece of paper, it says that because you bought that piece of paper, somewhere else, at some other time, some carbon dioxide was prevented from going into the atmosphere, or some other greenhouse gas was prevented from going into the atmosphere. So I can give you an example, a fictional example, that is not that much worse than what actually happens. I could buy a gigantic tank, fill it with oil, and I could sit next to the tank with a match. And I could, every day, write on a piece of paper that if no one buys this piece of paper, I'll light the tank of oil on fire, releasing CO2 to the atmosphere. And I call those things carbon offsets. I write carbon offset at the top, I emboss it with some official looking stamp, and they get sold into the offset market. Well, every day someone buys that piece of paper, so I don't light the tank of oil on fire. The alternate reality is where someone didn't buy the slip of paper and I set the tank of oil on fire. If it sounds like a scam, it's because it is. And like I said, many of the carbon offsets that are sold today and purchased are not much better than that.
So every time we think about offsets, even if we have really well-designed ones, we're essentially shirking our responsibility to be the leader and to do the process right. That doesn't mean a great project on Native American land in California or investing in preserving a forest is a bad thing. Those are good projects. My argument is that those are things we should do on their merits, investing money to help out climate impacted populations. But to do it via our offset markets is avoiding directly doing things at home. We should be doing both, but we shouldn't be calling it offsets. We should be saying this is part of our social compact around a sustainable, healthy climate. And at the same time, we're going to zero carbon out of our usage in the UC system.